Leadership and management training from Nicholas Hill.
This is communication to both internal and external stakeholders. Okay, so your internal stakeholders are everybody at all line levels. Okay, so these are team members. These are therefore those in the hierarchy or chain that are subordinate to you, your direct reports, together with those at line level and upper management as well. Communication at all levels. Who are the external stakeholders though? People outside of Amazon, okay, that hold a stake in the game. The customers, okay, the ones that you are directly what about the ones that you personally directly communicate to? Because that's what we're talking about here.
Contractors.
Contractors, definitely. Who else? Agencies, but there will be contractors as well. Depends whether or not you put them into that same category.
What government bodies like the HSE?
Yes, the HSE. All right, the Health and Safety Executive. Okay, so communication in times of crisis is important. Why?
To let them know what's going on.
Yes.
Everyone on the same shape. So
Yeah, on the same page.
Same page.
Same page. Everyone is aware. And it goes back to the opposite of what we talked about before, which is the non-disclosure. When you're in the middle of crisis and the has hit the fan, is it important to be transparent? Look, guys, this is really how bad it is, as opposed to I'm going to keep some things back from you. Yes. So what we don't want to do is to operate the same philosophy and ideology used by, let's say, the media, and only disclose what we believe you want to hear. Sometimes that's actually necessary, and the reason why upper management won't disclose their reasoning for the reshuffle. Do you remember that conversation from earlier? Okay, and they reserve the right not to fully disclose because some people might go, or they might disagree with it, or have a confrontational crisis and argue with you. Okay, so they've reserved that right and we have to respect that. Okay, but it doesn't stop us from what? Do you remember? Influencing them. Yeah, do you agree now that perhaps you have a little bit more influence over what the decisions made by upper management than what you once did? Do you believe you got a little bit more influence? Yes? Is that confidence coming? Hopefully through some of the strategies that we're talking about, the principles and the techniques and everything. So communication, number one. Number two, connectivity. This is the connectivity between all of our partners. All right, how do you improve connectivity? Okay, Caleb mentioned the T word, which is trust yesterday, but trust sometimes is married to another word beginning with R. And we need to build this with our teams, to build that connectivity. It's trust and rapport. Okay, what does rapport mean? Gave it away with that chunk on the circle. It means it's not just connectivity, it's a deeper connection with an individual. But what kind of connection do you have with an individual when you're in rapport with them?
Same level.
Same level? Okay, so this is a cordial relationship with another person when you are in rapport. A cordial relationship, a warm relationship, one where you get on with one another. Do you agree? Which means that there's no or minimal amount of conflict. Do you agree also? Yes? So you minimize the conflict, and naturally, if you are aligned up here psychologically and with your values, you tend to fall into rapport with that other person because you are aligned and you don't argue. Do you think this might be of greater importance during crisis than at any other time? Better believe it. Why? Why do you need that connectivity and communication in crisis?
You need to trust your team as much as they trust you.
That? Why else? Why do you need that rapport during crisis more so at any other time?
To resolve the problem.
You can resolve the problem that much faster if you are in agreement. If you argue when crisis hasn't hit, when you're not in the midst of crisis, it's likely that argument and those arguments will continue or exacerbate if you haven't resolved them previously. Yes? So nip it in the bud, or do even what King Solomon said thousands of years ago: don't let the sun go down on your anger. Resolve the conflict at the end of each working day. You don't bring it into the following day, because it stacks. Disagreements, stacking on disagreements, stacking on disagreements. What happens to that relationship then? And the crisis isn't even pending, let alone happening. What happens to that relationship when disagreements stack? Yeah. It's lots of mini conflicts, and eventually that relationship just goes down the toilet. Nip it in the bud, as we do with some of the other situations that might lead to a crisis. Okay, let's just take a look at some of the others. Those are the top two that I wanted to really bring your attention to. Courage and perseverance through the risk-taking. When you're taking risks in a time of crisis, people, again, might fear. They might need that further reassurance from you. Credibility, demonstrating credibility as a leader. How do we do that? How do we demonstrate credibility as a leader? Data. Do we practice what we preach? So if we're preaching to the team all of these principles that we see in this room and elsewhere, and we say this is how we should act and behave, this should be our attitude, do you think it might be relevant and important, therefore, that we also practice the same? Yes, and therefore we lead by, exactly right, lead by example, which builds the credibility. Yes? Decisiveness. Ever seen an indecisive manager? What do? They what? They flap. Okay. Oh, I don't know. Should we not? Shall we not? Indecision. I mean, that's an exaggerated form, but not making a decision is the equivalent of putting something on the back burner. Let's think about it. Let's have a meeting and then another meeting. We'll come back to it. Let's talk about it next month. You can't do things like that in a crisis, which comes back to the autocratic leadership style that's more relevant in a time of crisis when you need to get people out of a building because the building's on fire, right? So putting it back into a context. Again, emotional effectiveness. Going back to our emotional intelligence conversation from earlier, do you remember? Why do we need to be much more emotionally intelligent during crisis? We know from the last module.
People react different ways to the crisis.
People are
React different ways to the crisis.
Yeah. Behaviorally, in terms of communication, psychologically, and emotively, right? Because we talked about that in the last module. So emotional intelligence, a greater level of emotional intelligence, meaning, in layperson's terms, more self-control. So I'm not going to fret about it. I'm not going to flap. I'm going to drive through the storm with a level mindedness. Integrative thinking. What do you think this means? It's a bit more of a complex one. Comes from the work of Graham Douglas, integrative thinking, actually. Anyone know or not? It means really an integration of intuition and reason and an ability to solve problems. So it's an integration of all those three. Absolutely necessary. What about situational awareness? An awareness of the situation in times of crisis. Through data, obviously, we talked about that extensively, different types of data. But an awareness of the situation, as opposed to a blinkered view or a blinded view of the situation. Why is that situational awareness important in the midst of crisis?
Stay calm.
To stay calm, which will affect your emotional intelligence, but being more situationally aware might have the opposite effect. I'm now aware of everything that's going on. Now I'm stressed, which is why some people don't even read the news. right? Some people say, no, I don't read the news because of how it affects me here. It affects my emotions, it affects the way I think. But if you are a leader, you need that data. You need to be situationally aware. Otherwise, it's going to affect the other two, or actually, number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. You demonstrate very little credibility if you're not situationally aware. Why is that? You don't know what's going on. Why should I listen to you? You've got no idea what's going on. Situational awareness, absolutely necessary. Team leadership. Okay, so why is team leadership important? All the other components lead up to this point. You're leading your team. Why do your skills need to be adaptive? Why do they need to be heightened during crisis? Think about what they're going through.
Basically planning the crisis, planning what's going on.
Yeah, because it goes back to the planning. The planning stage is in the pre-crisis stage. The execution of the contingency plan is in the acute crisis stage. Do you remember? Yes? So this is where you need team leadership, and this is where you are saying what to the team in the midst of crisis. Don't mention support. Direction. And if not direction, it is the R words. They need to, hang on, what do we do next? Reminders. They need your leadership to be reminded of what to do when. As opposed to, oh yeah, we did the course on that contingency plan. What was step number 2 again? Let's stick around while the building burns. Oh no, that wasn't in the contingency plan. Okay, so they need your leadership to be reminded sometimes. All right, so 9 component parts of the crisis leadership model according to CDC.
Book now at nicholashill.com or call 0345 678 9900.